Nearly a year and a half ago, I released my video on Rewild's original list of their 25 most wanted species. Rewild is an organization that's on a mission to shine a spotlight on the importance of protecting biodiversity and restoring the habitats that wildlife depend on for survival. In 2017, they launched a global quest to rediscover 25 species that have been lost to science, but that have been assessed as having a high probability of still surviving. A species that hasn't been documented for over 10 years by science is referred to as lost. These organisms have an unknown status. Are they extinct? Are they seriously endangered? Are they thriving somewhere out of sight? By bringing these species back into the public eye, scientists globally have been able to raise the necessary funds to get out into the field and search for these plants, animals, and fungi that have been lost for decades, in some cases for over a century. In my first video, we saw how by 2023, 10 of the 25 species on the list had already been rediscovered. In this video, we're going to see how many of the other original 25 species have been rediscovered since the end of 2023. And we're going to hear about the other new species that have since been added to the list and hear their stories. Looking back at the original 25, as of December 2023, 15 remained lost. Of those, the majority of them have retained their spots on the list, but 2 of them have since been rediscovered. In 1928, a tree kangaroo was collected by German biologist Ernst Mayr on the Wondiwoi Peninsula of West Papua. Initially thought to be a Doria's tree kangaroo, it was later described as being a distinct species due to its unique coloration, and the findings were published in 1933. But for decades, no other specimen could be found. The identity of this species of tree kangaroo was often disputed, but when genetic research was able to examine the different species of tree kangaroo, it was confirmed that the Wondiwoi tree kangaroo was in fact a distinct species. In July of 2018, British naturalist Michael Smith photographed a tree kangaroo in the Wondiwoi Mountains that had similar coloration. The photos were taken at an altitude of over 1,600 meters. It's thought that these photographs are of the lost Wondiwoi tree kangaroo, though without genetic proof, it couldn't be said for certain. As a result, the Wondiwoi tree kangaroo remained on the list as lost. But more recently, the decision was made to mark the species as found, as the photos have gained widespread acceptance of their rediscovery, and there are plans in place for future expeditions to try to gain genetic samples to confirm their ongoing survival in these difficult-to-access regions of forest. In the Sierra Madre del Sur mountain range of the Mexican state of Guerrero, a small species of rabbit with fur that was a mix of red, gray, black, and white was once found. It shared its range with the Mexican cottontail, but was apparently much rarer. Despite having cottontail in its name, its tail is actually short and black. The species was discovered in the Omiltemi Ecological State Park and wasn't known from any other locality. Described in 1907, no other specimen of Omiltemi Cottontail had been recorded since then, and they were feared to have already gone extinct. But a photograph surfaced in 2011 that caused scientists to doubt that the species was gone. The rabbit pictured here looks enough like an Omiltemi Cottontail that in 2017 they were added to the list of most wanted lost species, and in 2019 expeditions began to take place in an effort to recover them. Local people were claiming to have seen reddish rabbits in the area, and the forests that were being searched were still in good shape. Hopes were high that the rabbit would soon be rediscovered, and earlier this year, after 5 years of searching, it was announced that the Omiltemi Cottontail had in fact been rediscovered. Researchers had searched in 10 different locations over those 5 years, and amazingly, the Omiltemi Cottontails were discovered still surviving in 7 of those locations. After being lost to science for 120 years, the species has officially been found, but it's considered one of the most endangered mammal species in the world. Now let's take a look at the other 10 species of plant, animal, and fungi that have been added to the list since 2017. The South Island Kōkako is a forest bird endemic to New Zealand's South Island and Stewart Island. It's closely related to the North Island Kōkako, but distinguished by its orange wattles, compared to the North Island species' blue wattles. Once widespread, the South Island Kōkako suffered severe declines due to habitat destruction and introduced predators such as stoats and rats. By the mid-20th century, sightings became increasingly rare, and the species was officially declared extinct in 2007. However, persistent reports of possible encounters kept hope alive. In 2013, the New Zealand Department of Conservation reclassified the South Island Kōkako as data deficient rather than extinct, following a credible sighting in 2007 near Reefton. This decision reignited efforts to find the bird, with the South Island Kōkako Charitable Trust leading searches in remote forests. In 2021, Rewild released a list of the 10 most wanted bird species, and the South Island Kōkako was on that list. Then, in 2022, it was given a spot on their list of most wanted species. Despite numerous reports of possible sightings and auditory evidence, no definitive proof, such as clear photographs or DNA samples, has yet confirmed the species' survival. However, conservationists remain hopeful, believing that if the South Island Kōkako still exists, it's likely in small, isolated populations deep within New Zealand's forests. The South Island Kōkako is a symbol of New Zealand's lost biodiversity and the ongoing struggle to protect endangered species. Whether or not it still survives remains to be seen. In 1951, a gravel company was excavating a dry section of the Blanco River in central Texas when the workers discovered a new species by accident. They came across a small crevice in the riverbed that still had water flowing through it, and there in the water were 4 specimens of a strange-looking salamander. The Blanco blind salamander measures about 10 centimeters long. It lacks skin pigment, has reduced eyes, and external gills that remain into adulthood, similar to axolotls. These gills allow the species to remain permanently underwater, likely in springs or deep crevices, so it can survive the hot, dry summers of Texas. Despite the fact that 4 animals were found, luck was not on their side. Shortly after being discovered, a heron took and ate 2 of them. The other 2 were put into museum collections, but one was lost over the years. Today, only one single specimen of the Blanco blind salamander remains, and due to being preserved in formaldehyde, its DNA can no longer be studied or used to search for the lost species. Due to the resilient nature of a fully aquatic salamander being able to survive in the dry riverbeds of central Texas, it's believed that this species has a high probability of still surviving out there. But a decline in water quality and quantity, as well as changes in water flow and sediment deposits, mean that if it does survive, it may be difficult to find. But efforts are already underway. For now, the Blanco blind salamander remains lost. In the early 1980s, Chilean mycologist Norberto Garrido was exploring the dense temperate forests of the Nahuelbutensis Mountains when he stumbled upon a peculiar mushroom. It had a grayish-brown cap, a slightly depressed center, and white gills underneath. Its stem, which thickened towards the base, set it apart from other fungi in the region. It was given the common name of the big Puma Fungus, and given a scientific name that honored the mountain range where it was found. But after that single discovery, the species was never seen again and became lost to science. Despite its disappearance, mycologists believed that the big Puma fungus might still exist, hidden beneath the forest floor. The challenge was its elusive nature. Scientists suspected that its reproductive structures, the mushrooms, only emerged for a few days each year, making it incredibly difficult to find. In 2021, Rewild added the big Puma fungus to its search for lost species list, marking the first fungus to ever make it on. This recognition sparked renewed interest in finding it, leading to a collaboration between the Fungi Foundation and Fundación Nahuelbuta to organize a formal search. In May of 2023, a team of mycologists set out to retrace Garrido's steps, timing their expedition to match the exact dates he had explored the mountains decades earlier. They also gathered from Garrido's thesis that the fungus was likely associated with Patagonian oak and Dombe's beech trees. On the very first day of the search, they came across a tiny mushroom that nearly matched the description. The color was right, and so was the location, but it was too underdeveloped to say for certain. They collected it, hopeful that genetic testing would later confirm their suspicions. For several more days, the team scoured the forest, comparing every mushroom they found to Garrido's original description, but none were a match. The expedition came to an end, and the field scientists planned a hike, inviting members of the community to learn more about the fungi species living in the forests around them. 25 local people joined in, from children to the elderly. As Gabriel Orrego, one of the leaders of the expedition, was describing some edible mushrooms to the group, he noticed that a pair of men had broken away and were looking at something else. When he went over to see what they were looking at, he was shocked to find that the men had spotted a cluster of mushrooms that matched the big Puma fungus perfectly. The team screamed, laughed, and cried because they knew that they had found it. DNA analysis later confirmed that the small mushroom they found at the beginning of the expedition, as well as those found on the community hike, did in fact belong to the big Puma fungus. Scientists are eager to study the species' ecology, determine its conservation status, and ensure its protection. This is especially important because much of the forest in the region has come under threat from logging. High in the Andes Mountains of Colombia, sitting at over 3,000 meters above sea level, is Lake Tota, a massive cold water lake that was once home to a very strange species of fish. Local people called it the pez grasso, meaning grease fish, and in English, it's called the fat catfish. It really did look like an overweight fish, being covered in rolls. It's said that the fish had so much fat on it that local people would catch them just to fuel their lamps with their fat. When ichthyologist Cecil Miles visited Lake Tota in 1942, he was surprised by the rotund fish found in its waters. He described it as a new species, but by this point, it was already extremely rare. Only a few years earlier, in 1936, over 100,000 rainbow trout eggs had been put in the lake in order to establish a new fishing industry. While this was successful, and the rainbow trout continue to thrive in the lake to this day, the fat catfish seems to have fallen victim to this introduced species, or at least this was the theory proposed by Miles. However, Colombian ichthyologist José Iván Mojica disputed this theory in the 1990s. He claimed that evidence suggests that the fat catfish and the rainbow trout inhabited different parts of the lake and would have rarely, if ever, interacted. In his opinion, the fat catfish was most likely still in the lake, but hiding in its most inaccessible reaches. Only 10 specimens of the species were ever collected, and the last sighting of the fish was in 1957, but some believe that the species persists. In 2022, it was added to Rewild's list, and in 2023, the search began. Researchers launched an expedition to Lake Tota, hoping to find evidence of the fat catfish. Led by Carlos Andrés Lasso Alcalá and Susana Caballero, the team explored deep water habitats where the species might still survive. They believe the fat catfish could be hiding in microhabitats in the lake's depths, but its biology remains largely unknown. The search continues, with scientists expanding their efforts to surrounding lakes and tributaries in hopes of confirming its survival. In 2022, as the global pandemic was coming to an end, deep-sea biologist Christopher Ma decided to delve back into his work by sorting through some old specimens being held at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. The specimens were about 60 years old, having been collected from the waters of Antarctica. In the 1960s, researchers aboard the USNS El Tanin were dredging the frigid depths of the Southern Ocean, hauling up specimens from thousands of meters below the surface. They were mapping the seafloor and collecting specimens, but the animals they found were packaged and shipped off to New Zealand to be examined by scientists at a later date. It proved to be too many for one museum to sort through, and in 2010, all of the echinoderms were sent off to the Smithsonian to be examined there. Ma, who specializes in deep-sea invertebrates, had already spent over a decade making his way through all of the sea stars that were wrapped in paper towels. But in one particular week in 2023, he managed to discover 6 new species in rapid succession among these old specimens, and one stood out among the others. At first glance, the sea star was unassuming, being a faint orange color and covered in small clusters of spines. But as Ma cracked it open to examine its stomach contents, he was shocked to find that inside its body cavity, it was carrying a brood of nearly a dozen young. Brooding is rare among sea stars, but for some reason in the waters of Antarctica, around 40% of species seem to do it. Most keep their young near their mouths or held in specialized exterior structures. But this species is the only known sea star that broods its young inside its body. Ma described it as Paralophaster ferax, the ice star, and very little is known about the species. It was collected from between 3,100 and 4,400 meters, making it one of the deepest known brooding sea star species in the world. It has remained scientifically elusive, leading to its inclusion on Rewild's search for lost species. No specific rediscovery efforts have begun as of yet, as its deep-sea habitat presents a unique challenge, requiring specialized vehicles to explore the extreme depths where it may still thrive. But hopes are high that the species is still out there, and that it will be rediscovered soon. The Pernambuco Holly is a small tree that was first collected in 1838 by naturalist George Gardner in Pernambuco state on Brazil's Atlantic coast. It has small white flowers and grows to a height of 12 meters. But after that initial discovery, no confirmed sightings were recorded. For nearly 2 centuries, it remained lost. Despite its disappearance, botanists believed that the Pernambuco Holly might still exist, hidden in the remnants of Brazil's Atlantic forest. However, this biome has been severely fragmented, with less than 7% of the original forest remaining. Rewild added it to the list of most wanted lost species in 2022, but the challenge was locating a seemingly rare tree that has been missing for so long in an environment that has drastically changed. Thanks to increased awareness about the species, in 2023, an expedition team led by Gustavo Martinelli, an ecologist with Navia Biodiversity Limited, set out to search for the lost tree. Before heading into the field, Martinelli and his team spent months meticulously scouring herbarium collections, botanical gardens, and museums for historical records. They found 2 unidentified specimens of Pernambuco Holly, one collected in 1962 and another in 2007. The 2007 specimen provided precise location details, giving the team a crucial lead. On March 22, 2023, after 6 days of searching, the team rediscovered 4 Pernambuco Holly trees in Igaraçu, a region that was once dense tropical forest but is now mostly urban areas surrounded by sugarcane plantations. The trees were identified by their tiny white flowers, which were spotted from the side of the road. The rediscovery was an emotional moment for the team, with one researcher describing it as like finding a long-lost relative that you only know by old portraits. However, the Pernambuco Holly is now in critical danger. As far as scientists know, only 4 individuals remain, 2 males and 2 females, all located in a degraded fragment of riparian forest. While the area is legally protected, conservationists warn that urgent action is needed to preserve and propagate the species. Researchers plan to collect seeds for germination and search for more trees, but these efforts will be costly. So the fight to save the Pernambuco Holly has only just begun. Primarily on the island of Cuba lives a group of rodents that you may or may not have heard of. The 10 extant species of Hutia range in size, with the largest being about the size of a raccoon, but the smallest, the Dwarf Hutia, is only about 25 centimeters long. It was once found across Cuba's main island and Juventud. But when scientists began documenting Hutia species in the early 1900s, they believed that the Dwarf Hutia was already gone. They identified this new species from some fossils that they had found, describing the Dwarf Hutia in 1917. But amazingly, only a short time later, a living animal was discovered surviving in the wild. It seems that their numbers had been seriously reduced due to the introduction of black rats and mongoose to Cuba. Between 1917 and 1937, Dwarf Hutias were recorded only a handful of times. One female specimen that was being held in captivity and observed gave birth to a single offspring, which is unique among Hutias, as the other species give birth to litters. The last confirmed sighting of the species was in 1937. For over 40 years, no evidence of their survival surfaced, until 1978, when biologists stumbled upon a mysterious nest in Ciénaga de Zapata, a vast wetland in Cuba. They believed that the nest belonged to the lost Dwarf Hutia. Nearby, they discovered droppings and gnawed wood, clear indications of a Hutia's presence. But was it the Dwarf Hutia or another related species? In 2022, Rewild added the Dwarf Hutia to their list of most wanted lost species, believing that the wetland could still hold a few members of this elusive animal. Expeditions have since taken place, with researchers setting up camera traps, searching tree hollows, and gathering local accounts from Cuban villagers who claimed to have seen small rodents in the trees that they weren't familiar with. But the Dwarf Hutia has yet to reveal itself. It remains on the list, and the swamp it was once known to inhabit is currently threatened by invasive species like rats and walking catfish, and fires set by humans to clear land. For more than a century, the Togo Mouse has remained a ghost of the West African forests. 2 specimens were collected in Togo in 1890. This peculiar rodent stood apart from its relatives with its short tail, rounded ears, and unique skull structure, and researchers assume that it likely has a range that includes other parts of Togo and neighboring Ghana. But after the discovery of the initial 2 animals, it seemingly vanished, having never had another confirmed sighting. But is it truly gone? In the 1990s, 2 different expeditions for the species failed to rediscover it. But more recently, experts have turned to local people to gather their knowledge of this small jungle rodent. In 2011, several hunters in Ghana claimed to recognize the species, even suggesting that their own hunting activities had caused the Togo Mouse's population to dramatically decline. Field staff in the Kiabobo Range National Park were shown pictures of the Togo Mouse. The park is located less than 20 kilometers from the exact spot where the original 2 specimens were collected. Just like the hunters in Ghana, the staff claimed to recognize the species, and local people even had a name for it, Yefuli. Villagers in both Togo and Ghana have described a rodent that matches the species description, and all the evidence suggests that it is likely still surviving in the small patches of dense forest that remain. Some researchers even suspect that unidentified specimens collected in the region could actually be Togo mice, though DNA analysis has yet to confirm it. Rewild added the Togo Mouse to its most wanted lost species list in 2022, recognizing it as one of the world's most elusive mammals. Since then, researchers have launched searches across Togo and Ghana, setting up camera traps, gathering local reports, and analyzing rodent specimens for genetic clues. Every expedition carries the hope that the species may yet be rediscovered, but the window of opportunity is closing. 80% of West Africa's rainforests have already been degraded or cleared for agriculture, and deforestation continues to carve away what remains of the Togo Mouse's historic range. Without clear evidence that the species persists, conservation efforts remain uncertain. For now, the Togo Mouse remains lost, and the search continues. Fireflies across the world are in decline, and the reasons are clear. Many species rely on wetlands, forests, and grasslands, but as these environments are destroyed or altered, fireflies lose the places they need for survival. Artificial lights disrupt their ability to communicate and find mates, while pollutants poison the soil and water where the larvae develop. With shifting climate patterns affecting their life cycles, some species may struggle to adapt. One species that has possibly already been wiped out is the similar firefly. The species was once found in the eastern and southeastern United States, from Maryland and Virginia in the north down through Mississippi. Its historic distribution covered an area of 539,306 square kilometers, an area roughly the size of Thailand. But despite once being widespread, these beetles haven't been recorded since 1983. Similar fireflies seem to have preferred open fields and agricultural areas near rivers, but because they've hardly been studied, not much else is known about the species. Entomologists and conservationists are hopeful that there are populations of these beetles still surviving somewhere out there, and they hope that by finding them, they'll be able to better understand their ecology and the threats that they're facing in time to save them. At some point in the 1920s, the exact date remains unknown, Portuguese scientist Amélia Bassaiwar and her husband Fernando Frade collected some specimens of a then unknown species of trapdoor spider from the forested slopes around the tiny towns of Frajuje and Vila Garcia. In 1931, the Frajuje trapdoor spider was described, and the specimens were deposited in the Bocage Museum in Lisbon. While museums are normally a safe place to keep important historical and scientific items, a fire in the museum in 1978 destroyed the only known specimens of Frajuje's trapdoor spider in the world. Luckily, some written descriptions of the spiders survived, but we knew very little about them. Of course, we knew where they were collected. We also knew that these spiders were relatively small, with females only getting to about 2 centimeters in length. We knew that they had a unique abdominal pattern, which included a line down the middle with several smaller lines radiating out, like veining on a leaf. And most importantly, they were said to have an interesting burrow structure. While most trapdoor spiders have burrows that are fully vertical, Fagilje's trapdoor spider had burrows that started with a long horizontal stretch before they dipped downward, setting it apart from all other recorded species within its range. In 2011, Sergio Enriquez, the invertebrate conservation coordinator at the Indianapolis Zoo, was performing research in northern Portugal when he came across abandoned trapdoor spider burrows that were built horizontally. While they were all old, they certainly weren't 80 years old. So it seemed evident that Fagilje's trapdoor spider must still survive in the area. In 2021, Enriquez began expeditions to the region through the Indianapolis Zoo in hopes of rediscovering the species. The team searched through the leaf litter, scoured for horizontal burrows, and even built artificial burrows in hopes of attracting males, but to no avail. In 2022, a spot opened up on Rewild's list of most wanted lost species, and Fagilje's trapdoor spider took it, making it both the first European species on the list and the first arachnid. In 2023, Enriquez led a team back to Fagilje in the fall, hopeful that this was the time of year when the spiders would be most active, as it was the breeding season. Amazingly, the team found a silk-covered, horizontal burrow that seemed fresh. When they excavated it, they not only found a female Fagilje's trapdoor spider inside, but also 10 spiderlings. They wanted to take a DNA sample to preserve for the future, but they didn't want to collect the female or her offspring. So instead, they relied on a defense mechanism that many spiders have. When threatened, spiders will often drop a leg to escape, with the leg sometimes being capable of regenerating. So they collected a single leg from the spider to preserve for the future. Fagilje's trapdoor spider has officially been rediscovered after being lost for nearly a century, but the habitat that they live in is still under threat. Warmer than normal summers have led to a drastic increase in wildfires in the region in recent years, and with the species' limited range, much work is still needed to be done to protect them. So these are the 20 species that currently remain lost on Rewild's most wanted list. They've also released a series of top 10 lists, including lost birds, sharks, fishes, amphibians, harlequin toads, small mammals, and legends. I've already made a video about their most wanted birds, and I may make videos on the other lists at some point in the future. These are the other 13 species on the most wanted list that I didn't cover in this video. The Cyrdaria shovel-nosed sturgeon was last seen in the 1960s in Kazakhstan. The bullneck seahorse has only ever been seen once in 1996, when one was pulled up in a net off the coast of Eden, Australia. Zug's monitor has only ever been collected once from the island of Halmahera in Indonesia in the 1980s. Wellington's solitary coral from the Galapagos Islands of Ecuador was almost entirely wiped out by El Niño events in the 1980s. It hasn't been seen since the year 2000. The Himalayan quail was first described from some birds in a private European collection. They were found in the wild a few years later in the foothills of the Indian Himalayas, but they haven't been documented since 1876. The Pondicherry shark is a small, meter-long species that was last seen in the shallow coastal waters of India in 1979. Some claims of rediscovery have been reported in recent years, but these have not been authenticated and the shark remains lost. The pink-headed duck had its last confirmed sighting in 1949 in India. It's hoped that they may survive in nearby Myanmar, which has been closed off to the outside world for decades. The Namdapha flying squirrel only has one verified specimen collected in Namdapha National Park in India in 1981. Miss Waldron's red colobus was described in 1933 and last seen in 1978 in Côte d'Ivoire, with some evidence that hunters have spotted the species as recently as 2000 and 2001. The Ilan Island cloudrunner was found in a meat market in 1953 in the Philippines. The exact island where it was hunted is still not known with certainty. The scarlet harlequin toad from the cloud forests of Venezuela may have been lost to the amphibian chytrid fungus. It was last seen in 1990. The New Zealand greater short-eared bat was seemingly lost to introduced predators in the 1960s, though it's hoped that it may survive in some smaller offshore islands. And the Sinu parakeet was last seen in 1949 in Colombia. If you want to hear each of their stories in depth, make sure you check out the original video I made in 2023. And that's it for today's video. If you're excited about the work that Rewild is doing in their search for lost species, consider making a donation to them. Their website is linked below. I want to say a special thanks to my patrons, who chose the topic for this week's video. It's thanks to their ongoing support that I'm able to produce a video like this every week. If you want to support the channel, consider joining us on Patreon. The link for that is also in the video description below. And if you want to see the original video on this topic, hit the thumbnail on the screen now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.